Okay.
It's an honor to be sitting with you, Joanna, as I think you've been one of my greatest teachers on this topic. And the thing I find myself saying most often now is that, like, in our grief is the source of our power, and that it is always there. Like, when we see the truth of the utter interconnectedness of all of us, there's no escaping that. Like, capitalism doesn't cut us off. Like, racism, sexism, all these systems that we're living in don't actually cut us off from the beings around us. And so all we can do is like try and pretend that we're not connected to the pain of the earth. But when we stop doing that, when we let our guard down, that's when we actually allow ourselves to be back in relationship. And for me, relationship is the source of our power in making change for the healing of our world. Thank you for those teachings.
And I feel so then the tears of grief become tears of joy, because we're tired of being lonely. We're tired of being isolated. And we discover as our hearts open in pain, that they're opening in love, that the pain and the love for our world are like two sides of the same coin. Thank you, Morgan.
Yeah, it's such an honor to be sitting here with each of you. Like, so very dear. And Ayana, immediately I thought about listening and the possibility that happens when we start to allow ourselves to move through grief. And for me, it's always just been about an opportunity to hear myself better, and therefore start to be able to hear other people that I might want to be or am looking to build relationship with. And that's always been, just deeper listening and more just reaching out towards each other in that way.
Kailea, hearing you speak kind of has reminded me of conversations we've had in the past. And I started to put these things together right now of so many people are so afraid to feel the grief, so afraid to feel this pain, because it is so big and it is so overwhelming. And maybe this grief or this pain stops people from even being able to have the conversation in a way that's open to everyone and allows people to actually feel that they're safe to be in the space, safe to feel heard. And so I just want to kind of talk about that as we are starting to awaken to the grief. How do we not shut other people out? How do we welcome everyone in and also take care of ourselves in the midst of getting really active and involved?
Wow. That is, a really multifaceted and big question. I think that somewhere in there's a lot to say about courage. And it's really asking oneself to be the bravest self when faced with, I think sometimes conversations that it's easy to pick a side, but instead asking what is actually the larger perspective that we have the potential to hold together. I would be curious to hear from others as well, but I want to keep exploring into this over our time together right now. Because it is actually, I think, a lot of our conversations that we've had most recently have been about the pain of losing allyship, the pain of losing friendship, when we start to talk about larger systems of oppression and the different places and positions that each of us are holding. How that in those loss of relationships, I think the wounding is the deepest, because there's something about how we're being pitted against each other, and we really, really have to be brave enough to see the larger view beyond just that one interaction.
Yeah, and Kailea and I were even talking about social media, just being able to even go on social media and just feeling like a barrage of attack or a barrage of, will my voice be heard and respected? And can we even get into these conversations? So thank you, that was a really beautiful response. And
so I think that's what is exploding now. There's so much hate talk encouraged and people freed into letting all their petty frustrations and animosities be exploding with the blessing of the Trump and his language and his regime. And so that we can let so there's a choice, we can let our exasperation with each other, there's so many, we can be diverted into turning on each other so easily. But there's a choice there. Can we, at this moment, turn to that which embraces us all? We have a living planet that we are decimating. We as humans, we as the extractive and contaminating powers of corporate capitalism, can we move over above all to look at what encloses and includes us all. It's like Gaia. It's so wonderful to have a name for our planet at this time. And that stirs in us the wonder that is being discovered in our time, that our planet is alive. It's not just a sewer and a source of raw materials. And that can we hear her voice, and we can hear her saying, my children, you'll always find reasons for being angry and exacerbated with each other. You will always have, but you don't have time for that now. Come, listen to me. Let me speak through you.
Oh, Joanna, that reminds me of an article I just read, that the earth has needs. The earth has a voice. The earth needs from us just like we need from each other and we need from the earth.
And we can be that voice.
Yes.
What other voice does she have in human councils? I mean, there are many. There's voices of the birds and the voices of the wind and the trees. But in those rooms of the cabinet meetings and the boardroom meetings, it has to be a human speaking it.
Morgan, do you have anything to say on that?
It's just reminding me of a quote from Paul Hawken. I'll paraphrase, that he talks about when you were graduating from college that the earth was hiring. She couldn't send a limousine or corporate recruiter, but instead she sent rain and that smile on your crush's face, because she needs us all in these times to step into what is ours to do, which I think is the most innate human desire, is to step into who we really are. That's cross-cultural and cross-applicable, and that's what I hear from the call of the earth, is just asking us to simply be who we really are.
The fully embodied self. And I find that the more embodied we can become as individuals, the more that we can support and uplift other people to be fully embodied. And I've been thinking about that in a lot of women's circles, just being able to support each other, being our full, unique selves, being our own flavors of people, and really having that creativity and excitement to be fully embodied. And another thing that I was considering is, we were talking about the overwhelm, we're talking about the grief and the pain. And I think some people, like for myself, like I've moved out into the woods. At first I moved out because I was afraid. And I thought, okay, if I can just go into the woods and I can hide and I can make it through this unraveling, so to speak. But I want to talk about why none of us can actually run away from this. Even if we think we can run away by protecting ourselves and here and there, protecting ourselves physically, having a food storage, I mean, you can go down the list. but why can't we really, or, let's talk about how we can't run away from this. No matter what, this will find us.
Because we're embodied. We breathe. So we can feel, is it the contamination, the pesticides, the radioactivity, the dust, the asthma making, the little kids that can't breathe right, that need their little medihalers that they don't even have the insurance to buy. We're all embodied. So maybe it's our bodies that anchor us into our mutual belonging.
Yeah, my work since I was 9 years old has been in and around the theme of climate change and climate justice. And for me, climate is the great interconnector. Like every storm, every wildfire is the earth screaming at us to remember that we're all connected. That the car that burns gasoline in suburbia America impacts our friends on the Marshall Islands in their rising seas. That we've got to this point in time where every message that the earth has ever sent has been ignored by so many. And we're at that climax of her screams that is climate change.
I think it's, interestingly enough, we are usually framing from the fear-based perspective. And so I'm always asking as well, like, what would it mean if instead of even thinking about running away or that there is a higher ground, really what the invitation and what the ask is for more people, for myself, to actually become more invested in the space that I live in. And within that, there's a true possibility of connection is joy. I don't think we've looked at it from that perspective enough. That instead of consistently thinking like how can we let people know that there is no more higher grounds? Instead, how can we let people know that they are standing on grounds, and that within just that understanding and that framing, there's bounty, there's community, there's really dear friendship, there's the possibility to notice and witness and understand what goes on around the place that you inhabit every day. And how does that actually feel inside of my own system when I think about it from that perspective? Like all of a sudden there's opening. So that I kind of just, thought about that inverse. And yes, there is no higher grounds. And yes, every ground and every community is sacred and is necessary. So.
And the third yes. And yes, that maybe the greatest longing is to come home to each other. This is a lonely culture. It's produced loneliness and isolation. So it makes us crazy with loneliness. And what I hear from you, Kailea, is just an invitation to turn and look at what our hearts want. And it isn't, so I have to figure out all the legal steps to take to ensure climate just whatever, or cap and trade for to avoid the worst for a little while, but just to reach out and take a hand. And if we could connect, only to connect, then some truth could come through us, perhaps, that would lead us to walk into a future that's what we can make together.
Ayana, even when you had originally posed the question, it started from the place of originally I moved away because I was running and I was scared, implying that there has actually been a shift. for you, and all of a sudden it's not about fear. When oftentimes when you share about what's going on in your home space and like what it has been for you to live so closely to the land again, it's about being able to bear witness again and again to your surroundings. It's about being able to like go to that creek and like put your hands in the water and how that makes you feel. So I feel like already it is, like there's a shift in that understanding.
Well, I think it goes back to the shift of grief, fear to love, from this separateness, isolation, to relationship. And it's such a powerful point to localize to where are we actually living, who is in our community, what can we do there. I think it's important to support projects that are outside of ourselves, of course, but we have the most power where we are. We have the most, we're not anonymous. Are we going to get Trump to do something? Or are we going to get our local state senate or our governor or our mayor or our county officials? Where do we actually have the most power to put our energy into? And it's a lot, I've been thinking about a lot, especially with Sisters Bonded in Action, about localizing and really looking at who is around us, the land around us. Let's start fighting from the center point of when we walk out the door. Is there pesticides the moment we walk out the door? If we're not going to deal with the Roundup that our neighbor is spraying, how are we going to deal with industrial farming? There's like these little steps, and I don't see things as being little, even if it's just getting Roundup to be cut out in your neighborhood. That itself is huge, because it's these models that other communities can take to say, oh wow, well, Sonoma County outlaw GMOs, and then maybe Humboldt could say, well, how'd you do that? Like, teach us. So I think it's such an important point about localizing in a global world. And Joanna, you had mentioned something in your last comment about connecting just to connect. And I want to talk about that a little bit more. What does it mean to connect during the awakening, to connect on that level where we're kind of allowing our selves to melt away a little bit, allowing our wounding and our fears and our frustrations and all of those things? How do we not always bring those to the table when we're trying to work together in these much bigger movements?
Well, Ayana, when I was sparked by the question of Kailea just now about what happened to you when you went in fear to hide out in the woods, there was not only that you found something in you but maybe it's the same thing, but I'm imagining, and I sort of sense that you allowed yourself to feel loved. You found yourself capable of feeling the love of the natural world, of the trees, of the soil, of the waters for you. Tell about that. We need to know how to receive love, that we're being loved.
Well, when I did run into the forest, I was deeply saturated with misanthropy. So I hated humans, I hated myself. I didn't think that this species could be loved because of all the destruction and the suffering that we have wrought as a collective. And I just went into the forest wanting to love and really wanting to almost be like a ascetic, or like a religious ascetic, just kind of being like, I am here, strip me down. I'm at your service. I am nothing, but I am here for you. And as I every day really did strip my identity and strip creature comforts and just try to be as raw as I knew how to be, I started feeling these little inklings of, oh, I am loved. This is a reciprocal relationship. I love, the forest loves, and we together are kin. We together are mother, daughter, child, parent, grandmother, cousin, brother. It's relational. It is relatives. And for me to find that type of unconditional love that I never understood in the human world, in the forest, I was able to then go, oh, I can do this with humans too. This is here too. And it's completely shifted my perspective on all relationships. And it's honestly probably been the most healing gift that I've received. But it took a lot of truth searching. One of the most refreshing things about talking to you, Joanna, a couple of years ago in the little budding stages of my own personal revolution, was that you were not hiding away from the truth. You weren't coming out, oh, it's gonna all be okay and we're all fine and we're, just get through it. No, you were hard line on the truth. And you were about love. And you were about feeling the grief. And you were about talking about nuclear. And that allowed me to trust that there really could be a great turning, because we could actually see what's on the table and not try to compartmentalize or go, well, this doesn't really matter, this doesn't count because we're humans and we'll do technology or we'll do this, that, and the other. So I think that there's really something to being able to love more fully in the face of collapse, in the face of the honest truth of what is happening. That to me is where the fire and the passion for the love really comes from, is really being in the honesty of our times.
That allows the great reciprocity. I don't think we can make it unless we open to the fact that we can't save the world. We cannot. But the world can self-heal, and we can be part of that, and we experience it. That's why I'm so fascinated by your allowing yourself to feel loved by the forest. If we could feel ourselves, we're so full of self-loathing. Capitalist system has taught us that self-punishing and self-loathing, we're never enough, we're never good enough. That putting down of the human has been the engine of capitalism to keep us buying and buying because we're not good enough. But if we let the earth wants to heal herself, if we can open to this as a joint project, that great reciprocity.
I would love if you would also speak on this misanthropy and self-loathing and how that keeps us trapped from really being embodied activists.
Yeah. Wow, thank you for articulating your journey, Ayana. I learned so much from your story, and when misanthropy comes up the most for me in my journey, I think is in understanding myself as a European American, as a white American, as someone descended from the first colonizers of this land, and how quickly in my exploring of my own ancestry has shame and guilt and wanting to be as small as I possibly can shown up. And that still comes up. And it's work every day to see that I have to both own who I am in this present moment and say, these are my gifts. This is my voice. And this is how I can stand in solidarity with those most impacted by the centuries of pain that have come from what my ancestors have wrought. And I have to turn back to those ancestors and say, I forgive you. Because in the same way where we need to heal that separation of the misanthropy today, we need to do it with those that have come before. And that's the hardest work. Is none of us are walking alone. We're all walking with all the ones that have come before and all the ones that are still to come. So our healing is multidimensional.
I have a really different perspective. So my family is First Nations from northern BC, and I grew up on Maui. And so my beginnings and my current understanding has always been grounded in reciprocity and in really close understanding of what it means to be of and for the earth. Creation stories are always originating around these pacts and relationships that have been made with other than human species and beings. And so it's just understood that our beginnings were in close proximity, and the only reason why we're still here is because of these agreements that we had made that we're currently breaking. But it had never been about hating myself or like being upset with myself, because the understanding that I am the earth means to hate the earth. I couldn't actually separate it in that way. And so whenever I'm sharing with people or facilitating a space, that is really the message that I'm wanting to bring forward, is that we actually come from the earth and will return to the earth. And our responsibility while we're here is to steward and to be really alive and active in that stewardship. Because to do that is to be in right relationship with our family. So it is really that like interconnected, that origin story for me is bound, with the earth's origin story. And so I think it's almost in a way of, it's more about reminding people of, those agreements, and also the larger possibility that lies ahead for us if we were to collectively remember together. So, yeah.
What do you see if we were to collectively remember together? How do you envision the earth in that state?
Yeah, the earth in that state is a really interesting statement. It's more actually that I think about spaces, and I think about communities and what that could look or feel like. I just recently moved here to California, to the mainland, from Hawaii, where I grew up, and it is very challenging to sometimes relate to people that I am in a consistent state of culture shock, just because there is actually another way to be in community with each other. In Hawaii, our understanding and of community and the responsibility that each of us take to be community members is a part of our cultural grounding, and it's just what we're taught from the very beginning. And so when I think about how the world could be if more communities started to wake up, I honestly think about I think about home. I think about accountability that takes place, because everyone knows everyone's face. Like, you cannot walk through the street without someone recognizing you and feeling comfortable enough to approach you and talk to you. So here, as it's been, in the mainland, it's really fast paced, and we don't often take time to actually just stop and talk to each other, and we don't know each other's names or faces. So maybe it could be just as simple as knowing each other's names and faces in the neighborhoods and that we inhabit. I don't think it needs to be like some big grand, I think it's a lot simpler than we want to realize. And I think the work is much more invisible than we also want to think of it as. It really just looks like showing up, day in and day out in the space that you live. So.
Yeah, showing up day in, day out. I mean, that's a lot about what I'm wanting to share in this webinar, is how do we show up every day? How do we show up continually in the face of what's happening in the world? And Morgan, you had touched on this idea of forgiving ourselves, forgiving our ancestors. And it kind of brought up this idea of deep time that Joanna has taught a lot about, because I think it's easy for people to get stuck. So it's like, don't look in the past, it's way too shameful, it's way too scary. Don't look into the future, it's also too scary and perhaps too shameful, and we don't know what's going to happen. And you know what? The earth is going to change anyways, so why are we doing this? Let's just stay in our compartmentalized, addictive minds and keep in this wounding and not really try to push through it, because we can really sometimes only see a very short time frame as humans. So I want to touch on this idea of deep time. And Joanna, what inspired you to start looking into this and writing and teaching about this?
It's when I saw that we were doing things thanks in part to our technology and also to market forces that we have to keep on growing our economy and our profits, corporate profits, that we were through engaging in actions that have consequences immediately that last forever. I'm thinking of radioactive materials. That contamination cannot be stopped, and it goes on to the end of time and beyond. I'm thinking of genetic modification, where we have the technology to scramble the DNA, and once we do that, we can't unscramble it. And I'm thinking of fracking, hydraulic fracturing, where we inject into the remaining clean water in the earth the chemicals. We can't take them out again. And so this means that we're in a moment where our karma, the consequences of our actions, even when they're taken in a hurry for pressure, for bureaucratic pressure or profit pressure, immediately affect people, but forever, and cannot be undone. And this means that the future ones, at least in my experience, are brought right here. And the ancestors and the future ones are like, if we've lost the future, we lose the past. They're like mirrors of each other. And the ancestors are in us. They're in our bloodstream and in our DNA and in the cut of our jaw and the texture of our hair, and their tricks of the mind. They're here. They want to act to save the world, but they only have our voices and hands. And the future ones, they're here as well. They're in our DNA and in our ovaries and in our gonads. The future's in us. So we're at a point that we can feel their presence. And I've experienced their presence as being wonderful, humorous and full of advice and helping me stay on. And they're, don't give up. You're the one who's alive now, and we're here for you. Yeah, and I find that in the Work That Reconnects, our deep time work, immediately people respond to it and feel, oh yes, I'm more than someone just at this treadmill of this hyper accelerated time, but the life that is in me is fast. And it can help us keep our balance and help us to find our patience. And help us to know things that we have usually feel in too much of a hurry to know.
I want to expand on this hurry mentality, this efficiency, quick, use this material because it's cheap and it will last for 30 years. And that's a long time frame for some people. Do things because we got to do it now. And there's this, and as technology grows, we're getting faster and faster and faster. And as the earth continues to unravel, we're pushing her more and more and more to unravel faster and faster and faster. So there's this this pattern I'm seeing where and I'm not sure what it is. Do you think it's this fear of scarcity, that things will be ending soon, just pull as much oil as we can right now,
Yeah.
spend as much as we can right now. And so I kind of want to talk about it on a large scale, like the end stage capitalism scale. And then I'd like to maybe go into how do we in our day-to-day lives make the decisions where we are not going to choose the fast and efficient route.
And we need each other. And to my own experience, we need to feel that the ancestors and the future ones are in us. They're in us, in our bodies, in our DNA, and in our mindset. And although they're ready to help us, but we're the ones who are alive now. But we're like surrounded by a cloud of witnesses. And they're here, they're in our bodies. You know, one of my teachers, a radiologist, Catholic nun, who was an expert witness at many a trial of anti-nuclear activists, she said, every being who will ever live is here now. Where? In our ovaries and in our gonads and in our DNA. So the future of life, we're holding it here. And instead of it making us feel frantic, oh, I've got to do more and more, just wait a minute. This life is vast. This life is vast, and I will seek the company, and I will open to the presence of the ancestors and the future beings to let them act through me. Do you feel that too sometimes, Kailea? Morgan?
Yeah. I'm thinking about it often, I think sometimes it can get so big and we're thinking like the ancestors and the future ones and how do we access them now? And for me, it's my little brother, he had a baby this last year, and it was this like tremendous an immediate lengthening of my timeline that I experienced. You know, all of a sudden it wasn't just me and my brothers and sisters at the end of my parents' line. Like, we had expanded that, and that sense of incredible unconditional love for this new being and who she's going to become and how it is that she's going to walk through the world, and then what will the world be, shifted a lot in me so quickly. And so it is, Joanna, the future ones and the ancestors are here with us, but some of the future ones are really, quite literally here with us. And this last year, I've really started to think about children in a way that I've never contemplated before. So much of it, that's why I always say, like, mothers are just the fiercest warriors, because nothing will stop, their willpower to protect their children and stand for what is right, because it is no longer about them. It's no longer about I. It's about this incredible we. That is like
this incredible we. Beautiful.
Yesterday I visited a museum in Oakland called the Museum of Capitalism, which casts capitalism in the past tense through a variety of incredible thought-provoking exhibits. And in one of them, you're asked to sit in a wooden box, and there's a screen, and it says, "What was capitalism?" Mm-hmm. And as I responded, and just how quickly the imagination can jump when asked a question in a different tense, was so powerful for me. And the question that came next was, what was the best thing you ever bought during capitalism? And I, of course, was just like, nothing. yeah, I guess I offer that as an invitation to, like, let's start asking one another questions from that place that we want to be, to look back on where we are now.
And the makers of that museum, the designers, were surely being helped by the future ones whispering in their ear.
I think it's really important to begin to ask ourselves not only how do we take down this system, but what does it look like to have a regenerative culture? And to start bringing our creativity and our imagination, our gifts to imagining this new world. And I always think about the revolution, and I think about, well, there needs to be some people who are taking down capitalism over here, and then there needs to be other people who are working with grief in communities, and there needs to be some people who are doing permaculture and regenerative. You know, we need it all. We need everybody in every system fully being embodied activists. And I think it's really interesting to wonder what is the best thing we bought of capitalism? What did capitalism really give to us in our lives? Was it worth it? Is that Starbucks, is that whatever worth every last old growth forest? Is it worth every whale, every salmon, every, you could go on the list, because what I'm saying is the more humans, the less salmon. The more humans, the less whales. The more and capitalism allows there to be more humans, because it allows more resources to be going to one species, to convert all other resources to more humans and human development. So I think just asking these questions, and I thought a lot about even asks in general, like what do we want to ask people when we're facilitators, when we're organizers? Do we want to ask them, go out and do this today? Or do we want to ask them, what are you feeling? Or how are we allowing this to happen? But the deeper questions, because I'm realizing, at least in my own view, is that it's not about these A to B. It's not about clicking, I sign this petition. It's so much deeper than that. And so I really been sitting with that, with the Tongass film that's coming out, and old growth logging. Am I just asking people to sign or to be upset about old growth logging? Or am I asking them, how are we in the position that we are even allowing a system to log the last 1% of all old growth? So just reframing these questions, and
Beautiful.
It's so interesting, and I'll just the reframing process, and so quickly how we also jump into the last old growth forest, which is an incredible thought. But I'm also thinking about what oftentimes I think now in modern day society, Indigenous peoples and cultures, we're asking ourselves, what does it mean to be Indigenous? And there's this incredible understanding around culture, and so even a question around what will it be, what practice or even actual, creation will it be that your future ones are going to treasure from you as the ancestor. And when I think about my family and these teachings, it's not anything that came from the capitalist society. So even I think that's a question, it doesn't matter what your background is, you can start asking yourself, what is it going to be that your people are going to treasure when they think back on you and this time, because it certainly won't be anything that you purchased.
No, and so much of that which we purpose will go back to the earth. And then there's some things like plastic and nuclear that will haunt us forever, potentially. So I'd like to start to come to the end of this conversation for now. And I want to talk about, I really want to hear from each of you how do I say this? The future looks challenging from the viewpoint I'm sitting at. I'm seeing no end to oil extraction from the industry anytime soon. The fact that we're even attempting to drill in the Arctic just shows the desperation. So I see everywhere in every globalized capitalist system this desperation to literally drain the last drop at any cost possible, by any means, by any cost, take as much as we possibly can until we can't anymore. On top of that, we have compounding climate change. We have ice melting. And I'm not saying this, just to the audience out there, I'm not saying this to necessarily scare you or to scare myself, but I actually want to be in the truth so that I can make decisions. If I don't know the full story, if I'm not actually looking at what we are up against, how am I going to show up in my full embodied self? So I'm just trying to kind of meta view out and say, wow, we are facing many, 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 many challenges. And in terms of climate science, I mean, 98%, 97% of all climate scientists are saying that climate change is going to happen sooner than we even could have imagined, and just the repercussions and the consequences of what we've been doing to the earth will be vast. So as we're looking into the future and seeing these changing times, I want to ask each of you, what is a little nugget of inspiration, of comfort, of empowerment that you are holding closest to you at this time that other people can share in?
My mind goes to a friend who is working on climate change, climate disruption. He's a war correspondent and now a climate journalist. And he's never been more in his power, though he's looking into the dark. I see us experiencing that what's facing us is too big for us to take in separately. That even to know what's happening, even to open to what is befalling our shared life in this living planet, we need each other. So that what I take courage and joy in is a coming back together that is somehow even deeper than what was known perhaps before capitalism, because we come back weary and blood-torn from this sad experiment, and that and tear-streaked and heartbroken. And we come into each other's heart minds to see together, to find home together, to find strength together. That in itself is something so beautiful and fulfilling that it seems like enough. The loneliness and competition can fall away, and we can discover who we really are when we're not pitted against each other.
Do you have a little nugget?
I have a quote that's echoing in my mind, and I don't know who it's by. Sorry, well, maybe one of you do. But it's don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive. But the world needs people that have come alive. And in the course of our conversation, I saw another level deeper in that quote, which I've always treasured, in that when we see ourselves as the world, we want the world alive, and so we turn ourselves alive, and that is all one and the same. And yeah, I've heard it from people I've known in different parts of my life who've asked me, like, how do you sit with making so many sacrifices to do the work that you do? And my heart breaks every time, because I don't see the work that I'm doing as a sacrifice at all. I see it as like the greatest joy and honor of my lifetime, to come more fully alive and stand on the side of life. And so this is like my greatest prayer, is that people who are lost amidst the mass psychosis of this time can see that stepping into their aliveness is all that's being asked of them. That it's not a sacrifice, that it's the greatest gift that they could receive. I'm thinking about.
I'm glad you just went, because my little nugget came to me as you were speaking. And it has to do with that coming alive, and this very new recent understanding that my day-to-day life is worthy of pause, that it is more enriching when I allow moments of stillness, and that these moments don't even have to be planned. And I thought about yesterday, I was working on a flower farm, and I was like harvesting and weeding and just in my task mode, I was just working. And all of a sudden I heard this massive wind, and it hit these eucalyptus trees first, and I was watching it, and then it hit this other tree that was about, it was closer, and all of a sudden I could see that the wind was so strong, all of these leaves, it was like this giant cloud burst of leaves released all at the same time. And I was like, this is a moment to stop. This is it. There is not anything more important than actually just stopping to watch this, the winds in this tree. And the leaves, it was like a bee swarm, it was so big, and it came at me, and it was like this still moment of just sun and the flickering, and they showered all over me, and it took a good 2 minutes for the leaves to reach me. It was just the wind carrying them for so long. And I was like, that's it. This is why I'm alive. This is why I do the work. It's for this moment. And I, am so worthy to take the moment to actually just let my senses experience and just witness.
Those were all incredible nuggets. Thank you. And I just want to reiterate some things I heard about the stillness, being able to take moments of quiet in a very loud, very fast, very busy world with phones and computers and information coming at us all the time. How are we going to hear the earth if we don't take a moment to watch the leaves blow? How are we going to hear this, our ancestors, these deep callings in us, if we don't take these moments of stillness? Also, I think about not just moments of stillness, but moments of rest. As activists for the long run, we're gonna need times where we're like, you know what, I need a moment off, and hey sister, can you take the baton? And then Kailea might run with it for a while, and then she goes, hey Ayana, here is back, or Morgan, will you take the baton for a while? And when we're building this community, when we're really in it together and we're not lonely, we can support each other, we can uplift each other, so we're not doing alone. We don't feel like we have to save the earth all by ourselves, but we are in it together, and it gives us time to be still, gives us time to rest, gives us time to run as fast as we can and just give all of ourselves to that moment. And I think also that, and that comes back to sacrifice, Morgan, and that I think sacrifice has been desanctified in a way. It's like, ooh, sacrifice, that's a dirty word, because in this modern culture, it's like, and you even hear that in commercials, you don't have to sacrifice a thing. You can lose weight by still doing it. It's like, no, sacrifice is beautiful. Sacrifice is a gift. It's a blessing. It's holy to be able to give yourself to that which you love. I mean, there's no bigger gift in this world that I believe. It is the greatest blessing to sacrifice yourself for the service, to be in honorable, life's work for Earth in all of the capacities that we can be. So the reframing of sacrifice and stillness and breaks and slow and deep time, I mean, these are just all such incredibly grounding themes that I think are absolutely pertinent to staying sane and active amid mass psychosis. So thank you all out there in the interwebs for listening, and please feel free to reach out to Sisters Bonded in Action. We'll be doing another series in the upcoming months, so if you have any topics that you'd like us to cover, let us know, and we will research on those and bring you more pertinent information that you really need to step into your full embodied self in this time. And I want to thank Joanna and Morgan and Kailea. And if you have any other closing thoughts that you would like to add to this moment, please do. And and this episode will be on forthewild.world. It will be a recording and it will be up there for you to watch at a later time as well.
Just a thank you to all of you and anyone who's tuned in today or in times to come. These conversations are my fire and my stillness.
Also just, echoing really incredible gratitude. This is just a blessing and truly humbling. And thank you for hosting and the questions and just your love.
Thank you.
Yes, and I thank you too, Ayana. What a gift to bring forth from us our deepest sense of how we make life sacred in that, which is the meaning of sacrifice. And to be connected with you sisters out there. I feel so grateful for this time that brings us together.
Bye-bye for now.
I'm going to want to watch this.